For the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love. Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work. Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Who or what are you celebrating today? As you know, for those of you who are here for the first time, my show is all about celebrating life, celebrating art, celebrate each and every one of us. And I am so excited about today's guest because I have the one and only Hillary Rollins in a beautiful upstate New York, sitting outside. I wish that I had the capability of sitting outside right now, which is where I will be after this show is over today, because it is gorgeous here in Rockland County as well. Hillary, I begin every show by asking our guest, who or what are you celebrating today?
Wow, that's a lovely question. I am celebrating, there's so much to celebrate. Narrowing it down to one person or thing is tough. So, on the instantaneous level, I am celebrating a show that I'm producing with the very talented John Forster at Don't Tell Mama in New York. So, that's my plug. Get that out of the way.
About that, of course.
Of course. So what I am celebrating the fact of doing that show live in person after 3 years in lockdown, after a whole, 10 years of producing live in LA and New York, and then having to be nimble as you were, Skipper, and find a Skipper. Sorry,
no, I love Skipper. You can call me Skipper.
It's such a great name. I was like, Skipper.
I have a lot of friends who call me Skipper, so that let's be friends. Call me Skipper.
Great. So yeah, so it has a greater meaning. This sitting here outdoors in the sunshine and knowing that we can gather in groups inside for live entertainment is huge. So I'm celebrating that today.
I was reading an article this morning, and it took me right back to lockdown in 2020 when we had to space ourselves walking around in the city. If I didn't even go into Manhattan, and I live literally 25 minutes north of Manhattan, and I didn't go into Manhattan for 2 years. And yet when people were in Manhattan, they were distancing themselves from each other, wearing masks. I mean, that's not how we were meant to live.
No, it has really taken, it's an old line, but it bears repeating because it has taken a huge toll, and it's transformative. And there's always a silver lining. I see the sunbeam coming down on my face. There's a lot of beauty in the transformation into being nimble, finding ways to connect and do other things, and come out the other side in a different space, in a different place, because life is change.
It certainly has. Well, it was a pause for all of us, and to me, it was a wake-up call. To me, it was a wake-up call because I think so many of us, there are things that we take for granted. We take for granted that when we, for example, buy our tickets and we show up at Don't Tell Mama, and that the show is going to go on, the artists are going to show up, everything's going to go on as planned. And then on March 12th of 2020, everything shut down, and all of us that are in this business were in limbo. Where were you when everything shut down? Were you here on the East Coast, or were you on the West Coast?
I was on the West Coast, and it's interesting because one of my collaborators, Michele Brourman,
I love her.
We love Michele, and Michele was getting a Bistro Award in New York, and she lives on the West Coast as well. And I think the awards might have been
the night before.
Close to the night before, very close to it, yeah. And things were brewing before she was leaving, but here's how they were brewing. I also do a lot of house concerts, and I was sort of famous for having these parties with lots of artists, kind of curated open mic. They're the best singer-songwriters in the world, and many of them live or come through LA. and we just have a blast at these parties, which was a big part of my life until lockdown. But at that point, I was throwing a sort of a smaller one of these parties with an artist who I had met recently, and some, and we were trying to decide whether or not we should have finger food, because there was this thing going around, and maybe it'd be better to not have food that people could touch. We were so clueless. And Michelle got on a plane to New York for the awards. She got her award. It was a wonderful night. And, she almost didn't make it home. We were in lockdown just after that. She said, I dodged a bullet. And I knew a lot of people working in the industry on both coasts who were, I had a friend from overseas. He almost didn't make it home to London. He made the last flight out.
You asked me before we went live how long I've been doing this.
Hmm.
This started as a result of COVID. Leslie Ann Warren, who is a friend, she was coming to New York to do Broadway Backwards, which is my favorite night of the year in the theater.
Huh.
She was coming to New York. I knew that she was doing it. I called her and asked her if she would be my first guest, and she said yes. So, and then after we did the interview, she called me up and said, Richard, have you heard about this thing called COVID? And I had not heard about it.
Yeah.
I'm being honest. And she said, I'm just hearing about this. I'm afraid to come to New York to do this. And I said, well, if you're afraid, you need to let the producers know. She called the producers. She told them that she was afraid. And they said, if you're afraid, we understand. And believe it or not, after her call, other calls started coming in. Right. And they made the decision to cancel the show, and then everything shut down. So it was something that she didn't even have to stress over, because the decision was made for her.
Right.
But yeah, I want to talk about you.
Yeah. That's hard for me, but go ahead. Let's do it.
You grew up, you were born into this world. Both of your parents were in the business. When a lot of people are either follow in their parents' footsteps, where they can decide to go in another direction. You were thrust into it early on. What was it about the business, seeing it both from both your father and your mother, that wanted you or pulled you in the direction of saying, this is also for me?
I'm not sure that that was a conscious decision, really. Because where I've ended up intersecting in really very much in both their careers. I was a singer, very much in the same tradition as my mother. She sang with a quartet, a vocal quartet. I sang with a vocal trio at the beginning of my career, but an Andrews Sisters harmony kind of thing, and did a lot of performing, and have ended up a songwriter and a producer and all that. But then on my father's side, as a producer, really, I call myself a producer, but in the genre that I work in and the way that I've worked, it's been kind of more like a presenter or a manager. Sometimes more on the side of just presenter, sometimes a little bit more personal manager. But I'm not necessarily producing, it's just a different genre than if I was producing film or TV or the way. So it's really more that what my father did. His name was on the films as a producer, but what he did was really build an artist's career as a manager. And so I kind of have ended up in all of those things. Very much the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, but it didn't start out as a plan. Life unfolds. And that said, I love it. I mean, there was a lot
I love
then, and I love now that attracted me. Like, I loved being around the people who were funny, and I loved being around the talent, and I loved the singers, and I was the Beatles generation, and all of that, those influences, a singer-songwriter, and I'm 66 years old, so you could do the math. But
I'm right behind you, so we're in the same. And I love reading about you and seeing the Beatles, and your father calling you in to see the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. That whole story, that is a movie in itself.
I know. I agree. And so, but I was also going and listening to, Sylvia Sims. She was like my godmother. I mean, I say to people today, Sylvia Sims, a lot of young people don't know who she is, but, I was in the cabaret and theater world, and I was always more interested in the theater part of it than my parents were. I mean, I could go to Broadway every night, musical and plays. I'm a playwright as well, and I love, like, it was the 70s was great theater, man. And there's still great theater. So yeah, so you I loved it. B, here's another thing. I also had I sort of saw it realistically. I hated that I didn't just get off the bus from Iowa without knowing anything, because I thought I would have been a star if I hadn't gotten in my own way, if I had that confidence of not knowing how hard it is. But on the other hand, I've been able to be nimble and survive and find my own path, because I knew from the beginning, as my father said, it's the only business where you can make a killing, but you can't earn a living. So,
Which is true, and I love that. What a
yeah,
great quote.
yeah. So you had to know, we're trying to do there's been interest in a documentary about my father and his role in the business.
Please tell me that's happening.
Well, it's complicated, it's complicated to get financing for film. He's dead several years. He lived to 100. But a lot of the people who would be in the film are also leaving this mortal plane. So we're trying to, if we can make it happen, we would like it to happen. And there's been interest, and there's been, it's showbiz. We don't want to go into the weeds, but there've been deals and not deals, and life has rolled on. So it's on a burner. Is it on the front burner or the back burner? That remains to be seen.
You were in a business, we both are in a business, where everyone's trying to put a label on what it is that you do. And what I love, your bio is phenomenal, because you wear so many hats. Your father, I love the fact you said producer and also a manager. He wore a lot of hats himself. What are the things that you learned from your father in terms of how he created his own path in this business? I don't think that he was able, or they were able to pigeonhole him into a quote unquote niche market. And I feel the same way about you in terms of looking at all that you've done, and that you are a chameleon in this business.
Well, I'm flattered. I mean,
well, let's face it. I mean, when I look at your career, everything from the Mickey Mouse Club to erotica. I mean,
I think you could look at, some people could look at it and think I was just insane. So
I look at it and I go, I bow to you. I love it, because you've done it all.
Well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I think I would characterize, I mean, it's really lovely to hear it put that way, Richard, because again,
and that's the title of your book, by the way. From Mickey Mouse to erotica.
Okay, yes.
Put that in your hat, Mr. DeSantis.
There you go. Exactly. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, yes. I was there. It's, I do think there was an eroticism to my trying to do everything, because I was afraid I couldn't do anything, and needing to prove to myself that I could, if you can't hit a moving target. So there was an erotic aspect to that. In retrospect, I would like to look at it as my friend John Forster says, I mean, he didn't coin it, but he's always pointing it out. I like to look at it as a feature, not a bug. And when you put it that way, that's really recontextualizing it for me today and reframing it, which, by the way, is the gift of being over 65, because, it's a reckoning, but it's also 2020 clarity and hindsight, and everything makes sense. When you get out of judging, this doesn't make sense, and why didn't this happen, and when did this, when you step back from 30,000 feet and see how things are connecting and how it all makes sense. It just didn't make sense. You were always walking the path. You just couldn't see the path. You know what I mean? I hate to get woo-woo about it. But I
No,
think
get woo-woo because I'm a very woo-woo person.
okay.
Well, but and
So
and I've asked other artists this. Do you believe, first of all, and this is going to get very woo-woo, so forgive me, in manifestation? Do you believe that you've manifested everything, or do you believe that everything unfolds as a result of circumstances and the people that you meet along the way?
I don't know that I have a clear one belief about that. I think that they are everything is everything, everything everywhere all at once. And I do believe that that we manifest, I believe that we are social, spiritual, physical beings, or soul embodied, and we do shit. And pardon my language,
No,
we
that's
do
quite all right.
stuff. And we it, if we get out of the way of judging it and self-criticizing and hatred and jealousy and all the if we let the emotions come and go and keep all of that stuff, because I lived it. I feel I didn't manifest success young early on. They used to call me a late bloomer, and I hated it. Nobody wants when they're young, oh, you're just a late bloomer. What that says is you're failing. Everybody else is blooming now and you're not. um and now I
Never
look
thought
and I
about that. That's interesting.
right. And now I go, okay, maybe they set me on a path. Maybe I was an old, whatever was my path. I went, we've all gone down a lot of, and where have you met an artist over a certain age who hasn't lived a lot of trauma, pain? That's what we make art. That's the source of why we need to sing.
Well, when you started out with your trio, was that your first foray into the business, or were there other aspects of the business that you were doing prior to that?
Well, I had started like taking voice lessons and auditioning and thinking I was going to, I dropped out of college to, for bunches of reasons, one of which was like, I think I want to go take voice lessons and try doing this, being a singer. And it really wasn't my calling. My calling was as a writer. And I knew that since I was a child. And my family knew that since I was a child. And they called me late bloomer. They also said, oh, you're the writer in the family. And I was. I was writing since I was, and I think like a writer. And I think that writers think a particular way. Some people write and some people don't. But I don't think, you know, I don't think everybody who writes identifies as a writer. And I don't think everybody who identifies as a writer or thinks like a writer or sees the world through a writer's lens necessarily produces writing. So that's been my experience, is that I am a writer, kind of the way I am a whatever dyed in the wool. But I could sing. I had a nice voice and I liked to sing. And my mother was a singer and we harmonized. And I was, cute enough to do that. And I liked to dance. And I started. So I did all that stuff. But it wasn't my greatest talent. It was a more minor talent. And it was also not my path. But it was
Well,
my path
I've got so
because
many
it took
questions.
me.
I've got a lot of questions about this group because I know that there was a lot of humor in the group,
Mhm.
and the patter. Did the patter come naturally, or was there?
Yeah. Yes, that's what I got really good at. What I discovered my voice was that I was a really good performer on stage, not because I was a great singer and not because I was born to sing on stage, although I still do it and I do it just fine. People say, it's it's I'm not untalented. I'm just it's not my I don't need to do it. Um I need to write and I need to be funny and I need to schmooze. And suddenly we were on stage and we were all funny, but I had the thing with the audience. I love spontaneous. I could improv with an audience all day. I don't know where that came from. Fear, talent, natural. I used to say my family, it was you didn't eat if you couldn't be. It was survival of the funniest. You
Well, your
know,
mom was a nightclub singer. Did she have that skill as well?
she was not that way. It's funny. She was a charmer, but she wasn't a sticker.
Mhm.
But she was a storyteller. Oh my God, my mother never shut up. I mean, we all. I am my mother and my father, very, very, very much so. In retrospect, it's funny, isn't it? You run to be your own person, and then you are your own person, and you're them as well.
And how did the group come together? And were you the driving force behind
No,
it?
No, the group had actually existed before me by maybe 2 weeks
Okay.
or a few months. I don't know. It was three women who had decided to try and do this, three young actresses. And then one of them, it wasn't working out for some reason, or she didn't want to do it. I can't remember. And so she left, and they were looking for a third person. So the group was called Hilly, Lily, and Lulu. And it
Mhm.
was myself, Jeannie Kaufman, and Marcia Sultan. And Jeannie Kaufman was Lily, and Marcia Sultan was Lulu. And Jeannie and Marcia had already started this with this other woman, and I can't remember now who it was, but and they had some arrangements. They were rehearsing. They were playing with the idea. And Jeannie and I met in an audition for Fiddler on the Roof. And we always said we were the only two Jews at the audition, which was true. You know, they'd always cast some girl from Iowa as Huddle.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say this because I just, a couple of years ago when the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof opened, I went to the opening night and I said I would love to audition for this, but I don't speak Yiddish, and no one in the cast did.
No, I know. Amazing. And amazing how they actually alliteratively learned it.
Exactly.
Wild. It was wild. Yeah, so she said we hit it off at this audition because, as I said, and she asked me if I wanted to meet Marcia and come audition, which was, sing together. And that's how it started. And it was just, at the time it was, you just see it so differently years later, but we started on the streets. We started a cappella on the streets, busking, basically. And we did very well. One of the best gigs I ever had, because we were 23 years old and dressed in 40s costumes in 1977 and singing Andrews Sisters' Close Harmony. Nobody was doing that. I mean, people were doing that. A few people were doing that, but on stage, but we were not the usual street corner event. And we also discovered it. We were in the Village, but we found a spot in Soho when Soho was just beginning to get really Tony. So people gave you dollar bills. Like in the Village, they gave you quarters, nickels, dimes, and quarters. In Soho, they threw dollar bills in that.
Wow.
This is in 1977. That was a lot of money a Saturday afternoon in Soho. We did very nicely. So
And when did the nightclub work start to happen as a result of that?
it's a funny story. I'll get to tell you exactly who it was. We went indoors, off the streets, into the nightclub first time as the opening act for none other than the Silver Fox herself, Jamie DeRoy.
Wow. Wow.
That is a little known fact. Yep. And the
Wow.
reason, and even better, I think the reason Jamie found us was that Joy Behar had seen us on the streets. And somehow we were at an open mic or something, and Joy was just starting out. We were all she was a little older, but we all knew each other because we were all doing the same thing in the same place as you do. And somehow Joy, I think, recommended us. And here was the problem. We said, sure, we'd love to do your opening act. We don't have charts. We sing a cappella. And she said, well, you better go get some charts, girlfriends. So we had to find a musical director. And I don't know if you ever came across a woman pianist, MD in New York back in the day, named Jan Rosenthal.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Now I'm going to cry. Jan was our musical director.
Wow.
Jan is what I haven't grieved yet that part of my life. I need to, because Jan was a very important part of my life and a brilliant musical director for us.
Wow.
Arranger.
Oh,
she didn't do our first bunches of arrangements because we had a few someone had done. We brought them to her, and then we needed more material, and she started writing. She never really got full credit for how good a vocal arranger she was, and she toured with us and she played for us. I mean, we had other pianists when we had a sub, but she was our gal. Anyway,
You started getting seen. I mean, you got reviews in the New York
yeah.
Times.
So then we started. So then we had an act. Then we'd gone indoors and we had charts for 6 songs or 8 songs or whatever an opener was. So then we needed to. Then people were like, "Well, do you want to be the headliner?" Okay. So we started. Now none of us were writing songs at the time, so we were doing either material that we were doing arrangements of, and we had a few people. There's a wonderful writer named Mark Saltzman who has gone on to win.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Mark. He's won a lot of.
Lavin.
Yeah, and he was a young songwriter at the time, and we did 3 or 4 of his songs, which he arranged for us. He wrote a couple songs for us. David Evans was my boyfriend back in the day. You know, he was writing partners with Lenny Holtzman. That they wrote a tune for us that went on to be, without us, went on to be in the off-Broadway show, My Name is Alice. So there were all of these, you know, everybody was building their careers then. And we did this for 10 years, and we did end up having a career with it. Like all groups and all cabaret, you know, life, it was hard to sustain past 10 years.
I was going to ask, who was was there one specific person or event that caused the breakup of the group? And were you thinking about what was next as this was happening?
You know, I don't think that, boy, that would be a different story from each of us, and I'm loath to go. You know, it was not my calling, and it was not ultimately. It was a really fun in a lot of ways, and really had its, you know, it's invaluable experience. But we couldn't earn a living. We weren't. We were young women looking for fertility mates of one sort or another. Like, life was happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was the youngest. I was 23 when we started, and the others 2 were, I think, 26 and 29 or something like that. So we were already, and she was already a little closer to the anxiety of reproduction and all of that stuff that comes with life and being female. So, you know, so much was going on in life, and our careers were not taking off. We weren't a household name. You know, if we had been the Pointer Sisters, if we had been, I mean, other people who were doing girl groups were having record careers. We were singing 1940 stuff. We were funny. We were charming. I think we were probably really a lot of fun, and we had our fans. But we didn't have the chops of some of the groups like Manhattan Transfer. And we didn't have we didn't have an instrumentalist among us who could do arrangements. We just didn't have the whole package it took to be musical, to make that our career fully. Mm-hmm. And Jeannie initially, I mean, I did a little bit of theater throughout that time, and Jeannie did a lot of theater. That was really, she wanted to be in theater.
So this was really, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, was this essentially a sideline for all of you?
It was a side hustle by default. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a while we're auditioning, let's try to do this thing to have something to do and see what we can do. And then it started to give us more opportunities than auditioning did, for the most part. So that's the role of the singer, actor, you know, chorus person, right? You go where the work is, you figure it out, you build. I mean, most of cabaret is people singing Broadway who wanted to sing Broadway but have realized that they can have more control over their career. Not waiting
all this time. I mean, but were you writing as well during
all this? Writing. So one of the things was that I was not writing, and I was not comfortable. I was not a happy camper, and I was probably a evil bitch to work with. I don't think I was a bitch, but we had our issues as you know, best frenemies as a group. And I know in retrospect that my issue was that I was just not doing what I wanted to be doing, and I wasn't really being authentic. And I was not feeling and I was feeling marginalized by the fact that, I wasn't shining the way I knew I wanted to shine as a creative person, but I didn't know what to do about it, really. And I knew deep down it was, you're a writer, you need to be writing, but I was a late bloomer. I had a lot of resistances. And I was living, part of it I think was growing up with my father's clientele were essentially writers. They were comedians, but really what he was looking for in a comedian wasn't somebody who could do the performance part, it was the content. And these were geniuses, Woody Allen and,
Mm-hmm.
these are writers. And a comedy at its best is, it's all fueled by the writer. And anything, a play, a song, there's nothing better than a great singer singing your song, but without your song, they got nothing to sing. So that's the sort of heart of it for me. It's a communication, and I wasn't comfortable in my own skin in that role enough to make that work. And finally, for me, writing, it became a clear choice between it hurt more not to write. See, I resisted writing because it was what I wanted to be doing and needed to be doing, but I was neurotic about it. Inner critic, whatever. I had all kinds of resistances. And it was very painful. And it became more painful not to do it. And I do very much believe that a lot, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I think that's a really positive spiritual truth that life is a choice between what hurts and what hurts worse. And when you choose, when I finally said it's going to hurt more not to write than to just say I'm a writer and start doing it, even if I fail or even if all the worst, whatever it's going to be, I can't not do it anymore. So I started doing it. And I was around 27, which is late for a writer. 27, 28, because most people in the writing world, they're born writers. They've always, and there's a lot of bullshit in our culture too. You don't have your first novel out by 19, you're nothing.
That's right. That's right. But, and it's also a very, a private, personal thing when you're writing. When did you feel comfortable sharing your writing with others?
No, yeah, it was painful. It was scary and hard, and that's just developing a thick skin, though. And that's true whether you're, I have a 23-year-old daughter now, and she is also a budding writer, and she's also struggling with whether she is or not, and how to manage that. She mostly is interested in being a lyricist and songwriter, but she also has written essays, and she's not working as a writer. She's working in the industry in a management firm. She has not fallen far from her grandfather's tree either.
I see that.
And the reason I bring it up is she probably won't, do that forever, but she's learning the ropes of this and that along the path. And it's just as scary to be doing anything at the beginning and share it, expose yourself. Writing is that much more exposing in a way. But whatever you do, you have to live through the pain of the inner critic, the outer critic, the risk taking, or put it in a drawer and no one sees it, and that's fine too. But you don't get a thick skin without walking through the fire. You walk through the fire. You have to be a fire walker
on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I have a two-part question for you. It's actually a three-part question, but what was the best piece of advice that you received from your father in this business?
I want to say in this business, I used to have a bit about it, sort of, because I always said there are two things my father said to me my whole life, and they weren't necessarily about this business, but one was always, but in a way they are. One was keep your eye on the ball, which he literally said when he tried to teach me to catch, and I never could. It's never going to happen. He never had a son. I could never catch a ball. And the other thing he said was never kid a kidder.
Well, some sons can't catch a ball either, just to let you know.
I know. He was fine with it but it was like, it was, and also never marry a man without a sense of humor, which I never married a man. So so I got a pass on that one, but
Okay, that's good.
yeah.
And from your mom, what was
Mom, God bless my mother. My mother was really a beautiful soul, and did not she loved very unconditionally. She just believed that, you know, it's show business. Go into it if you want. We can't tell you not to. You wouldn't. She said, they both said, how could we tell you? We knew that it was a terrible business to go into on one level, but the reason people don't want, and we would struggle with that because we all ended up in it in some degree or another because we were all in the arts and artistic, all three daughters. And she would say, it is a terrible business. And yes, don't be an actor unless you can't do anything else. And all the things you hear, all the scare tactics that people tell people who are driven to be creative. Um, and but my parents, even though there was a lot of expectation being in the business, and it was hard for me, hard for all of us, because we grew up with these geniuses comparing ourselves to the creme de la creme of people who had already had shining stars in the firmament. How do you start out and make your mistakes? And I never did stand up because how could Jack Rollins' daughter do stand up without being, I couldn't imagine. I found another way to be funny
Mhm.
so that I wouldn't have to be judged in that arena, right? So it was sort of like, it was like being Sinatra's daughter. It's not great to be exactly what your famous parents do, and
Or being one or the other.
or being
That's
right, right,
yes.
right. But my mother and father both said, we did it. We went into it knowing we shouldn't. How can we tell you not to? You got to do what you got to do. You do what you want to do. You follow your heart. And they were very supportive, and
Well,
frankly supportive financially too. They were like, okay, we can open doors for you, but you have to walk through. And they didn't really open doors. They did what they did, but they didn't penalize us. They helped us along our path, which was
there's
nice.
a reason for the next questions that I'm gonna ask. What was the most difficult thing that you saw your father go through in this business, and how
Uh,
did he get through it?
Geez, my father there's a very famous story that people don't know about today because it was so long ago. I didn't see him go through it. I was maybe 3 years old, but I grew up with it, very embedded. And it's very much a part of his story because he was Harry Belafonte's manager, and they created each other. My father wasn't a manager. Harry wasn't what he ended up being. He was a singer, but he had sort of dropped out, and he wasn't the Harry Belafonte we know today.
Mhm.
Wasn't doing the island thing at all. And they were very young, and they knew each other from the village, and that crowd, the upstairs and the downstairs, and the Dwayne and the. I mean, these are names you won't know, but maybe you will. These are really old New York nightclub, cabaret venues where people were paid to sing and paid to do comedy as a live, weekly in-house act. I mean, you could earn a living doing it then, in the supper clubs, and that's really what I long for.
Oh, you and me both.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is so we. But anyway, um, without getting too far into the weeds, I would say that my the rise of their careers together, and then Harry broke his heart, literally broke his heart. And now Harry's got another version of the story, and he's written his book about it, and he's a great hero to many people. And I'm not no axe to grind, but the karmic connection between these two, including right up here where I'm sitting in, which was my parents' summer house. 50 years later, he bought a house up here. Belafonte did. I mean, it was like a weird. Their paths crossed. I went to school with his daughters. There were so many ways that from the beginning to the end they were connected, but that it had gone from being like a brother, father, uncle, friend. It was like the son. It it was that early management thing. And then they went through something that broke his heart. And I don't think he was ever the same. So that was the hardest thing. When you're a personal manager and working with clients and talent, and you're involved emotionally. And you can tell yourself that it's a business, and it is, but it is not, it's also an art, and an art form where there's love and there's heartbreak and there's relationship and connection and broken connection. That was the hardest thing. And yeah.
And the same question for your mom, the most difficult thing that she went through in this business and how she got through it.
Well, she left the business to have kids and she was very much a supporter and claimed she wanted it that way, her 3 daughters, we did a lot of arguing about that through our, get mom into a feminist consciousness raising mode here. But my mom she was an artist in her own way. She was living her life the way she wanted to live it, as within her vision of it. So she just left singing because she got married and had children. And she said, I was never gonna, she said I was too short for the costumes. She was, which was true. Those were the days when they had singing choruses and dancing choruses, and you didn't have to be tall and you didn't have to dance, and you had large numbers of voices on stage. So you had to be tall enough for the costume for the singing chorus, and she was always too short for the costume. And she was a good enough singer, but the girl next to her was a good enough singer and fit the costume, And she did do some cool stuff. She was on your hit parade on TV as one of the regulars. She did TV. She toured.
That was not an easy gig.
That was not an easy gig.
Right.
Yeah. So she did her shit, and then she was like, but she was very involved in my father's career and in building. She was very much the woman behind the man. And the hardest thing I think for her was dealing with he was very much a depressive. He's very successful, but he shouldn't have been in any other business where, he had to get up at 4 p.m. and stay up till 4 a.m. because he was in a depression, and that's how his mind worked,
And a nightclub world also.
And a nightclub world, and it worked for him. And he wasn't a drinker. He was a guy who drank coffee all night at the club watching the comics, and then said, "Coffee doesn't affect me." Didn't sleep.
Have you ever dealt in this business with the imposter syndrome?
Every minute of every day.
Mm. And how?
I'm having it right now.
Not with me. No.
I am. And you know what? Everyone is. That's the beautiful part. You finally, my daughter has it. Everybody has it. The only relief I have now is being old enough and having done enough therapy, spiritual work, whatever it is, what one does in life, to go, oh, that's why it's imposter syndrome. You've done everything you've done, and everybody has done everything they've done, and none of it really is what they think it is or isn't. But we're all walking around in fear that we're not who we say we are. We're not okay. We're not good enough.
And I'll tell you something. I've done 700 of these interviews, and everyone's going through it. Everyone's going through it. But tell us about your upcoming show that you're producing at Mama. And then I'm going to have a little fun with you. I hope it's fun for you. I've got some random questions about the creative process based on my own readings and writings myself. So tell us about your upcoming show.
So John Forster is what known as the songwriter because he's a genius. And he's had a wonderful, wonderful career, but he's not necessarily a household name. And that's part of the function of being a songwriter first and a performer second, although he's done a lot of performing, but it's been a long time since he has. And he is ready to sort of come back in this emeritus portion of his career and get back on stage again. And he's as good as ever. He's sort of known among people who know him as the Tom Lehrer of today. And there's a whole world of Tom Lehrer fans. Tom Lehrer is still around; he's in his 90s, but John is in that ilk. He's a satirist, he's a humorist, and
Is
he's
he
also
performing anywhere else these days, or is this really a
well,
big
he's
comeback for him?
well, it's a big comeback that he'd been doing lots of other stuff, and we were working on a project and a co-write and co-producing project, a songwriters project. And up here, up in this area where I am in Hudson Valley, there's a venue called Spencertown Academy, and they do series. It's an arts venue, a community-run kind of non-for-profit. And I pitched them the idea of bringing John and Christine Lavin, who's Christine. She's a great
He's been on
folk
the show. I
singer
love her.
songwriter. And we did a co-bill with them, and it was sold out, and they were brilliant, and it was beautiful. And John said, I really do want to get back to doing this, and I want to perform again, and I want to tour. And he's, we're all the age we are, but he's in better shape than most people I know. He'll going to go a lot longer than most of us. And he's a brilliant pianist, and he knows everyone, but he's very shy. He's funny. He's not somebody who blows his own horn. So he wasn't going out and doing it. He was doing it as a songwriter and living his life. And he sort of wanted to get back to it. But I said, John, would you do the show? And then when he did, he said, would you consider, helping me get back to building a show we can tour? And I said, for anybody else, no, but for you, yes. No, I do it, but I do it, for the people I want to do it for, and he's one of them.
And when will he be there?
He will be there. So he opened on the 16th of April. That was Sunday night.
Okay.
And the next two are Monday night. So it'll be Monday, April 24th, and Monday, May 1st.
I'll make sure that all the information's on my
Great.
YouTube channel so that we'll get about that as well.
Yeah, and it's 7:00 at Don't Tell Mama, and it's such a fun night, and really, I guarantee, laughs and a lot of love.
I'll try to get there. That's
Great.
fine. So I'm going to have a little fun, I hope. I've got 3 mystery questions. So pick a number 1 through 3.
Okay, 3 is my favorite number.
Okay, great. And it is, I love this. Get something off your chest in a loving way.
Now? Do
Today?
it?
Yes.
Oh, I think I've been doing that the whole interview because
Well, if you have, you've been doing it in a loving way.
Thank you. I mean, I think, it's I guess what I want to get off my chest in a loving way, you've already touched on in a very loving way, which is that I do have imposter syndrome because I'm not a big star in one field. I'm a jack of all trades, and my fear is master of none, and I struggle with the low self-esteem of not being able to, I guess, what I thought would be something that I knew I was, and everybody else knew I was that, and it's all I did, and it's clear, and it's not.
Hillary, you're singing my song, so call me once a week and we'll
right. So I think getting it off in a loving way is to say, that owning it, that's my neurosis and my experience, but sharing it with you, having the opportunity to share it with you.
No, I know exactly what you I'm exactly there. So this next question, and we touched upon this with your dad, and without mentioning any names, it says, have you ever had to deal with someone bad in this industry? And I'm sure you have. And if so, how did you deal with it, and how did you get past it?
Bad. There's so many versions of that. So
someone who, let's put it this way, because there are very many versions. Someone who tried to stand in your way with something creative.
I don't have a story that comes to mind where I would say that. I would say that, but I will tell you this story. I did go on a date with with Bill Cosby when I was 18 and he was 40 something and married. And I went out to dinner with him, which, and that's all that happened. I got out of there when I figured out this is weird. But it comes, I go like sliding doors. I could easily have, it could have been really bad. And maybe I was protected by the fact that he knew my parents. I met him with my parents actually. And he was a casual sort of, oh, well, I like to help young actresses. Why don't we have dinner? And I was like, well, that's weird, but okay, how am I not going to go? Like, this is an exciting adventure. Bill Cosby wants to take me. I'm like maybe 19, And I called my mom. I said, I know he's married. She said, we were at his wedding. I'm like, but he wants to talk to me about show business. And I don't know. I'm not going to do anything but meet him in a restaurant. And she said, you got to live your life. Just keep your eyes open. And I did. And it was a bizarre experience, but it wasn't, I didn't feel in danger, but I had the instinct to go. It was so bizarre. He so didn't pay any attention to me the whole time, like at all. And then wanted to like just keep, like when I said I wanted to go, he wanted to get me a cab. And I said, no, I'll get my own cab. I'm fine. It was a very bizarre experience. But when, of course, all the scandal broke, I thought, there's been that kind of bad happening every day. And that would have been the worst for me if it had turned out to be bad. So I've never had anything at that level. But as a woman in this business and as a young woman in this business, I never didn't have that. Like every woman had a version of that. It may not have been terrible. It may not have been a rape or crossing a line, but how we dealt with somebody who people would have expectations about. We just fielded it like, oh, don't play with that person because that they've got an agenda or whatever. And I think I dealt with it by being a tough New York broad with a strong force field.
Well,
So
thank God for that. But there are just so many people in this business. It's just the power grab of feeling that you've got that power over another person.
Over another person, right?
Wow.
It's weird, and that's of course only we're talking sexual assault. I'm not trying to get heavy. Like there's other kinds of bad. I just thought it was a weird when that happened. It was friends who knew that much later said to me, "Why don't you tell your story?" And I said, I have no story to tell. I believe this all happened. I believe all these women. It didn't happen to me, so I am not gonna. That's the whole story. But yeah, it's a business full of nut jobs and creatives and wonderful, wonderful people too.
That's true. Yeah. Wow. Wow. What a great. Oh well. Thank you for sharing that. Um, on the other side of this, this is an interesting question.
I'm sure that isn't where you planned for this to go.
No. I know. I appreciate your honesty in going there. Do you find this is an interesting question I'm about to ask you? Do you find that you have ever judged other people in this business?
Oh, terribly. I mean, the spiritual path, man, it's kicking my ass now because that is really the truth. If you're pointing a finger, there are three more pointing back at you, right? I'm not afraid to say that I'm a proud member of Al-Anon. I believe in the truth of the 12-step, the brilliance of the spiritual truth, the capital T truth. And it's a business of judgment, and we judge ourselves. That's all that horrible, the creative process has its own engine, and then there's the critic and the judge, and it's a constant war between those demons, and you have to find ways to manage it if you're going to survive it. But what the first thing you notice eventually is, oh, this isn't working for me. I'm not happy. I'm not getting where I want to be. And then you start to notice that you're judging everyone else and everybody else really harshly. And then you start looking at what's inside your hula hoop and go, you know, that's a bitter pill. You walk around with a bitter, you got poison. This one is this one is that one, that one. And that is not attracting, that is not how to win friends and make, spread love or creativity. So I judge people all the time. I catch myself. I try to look at what that's about in me, because that's
Judy
all.
Garland once said that she found that every time she was looking through the peephole at someone else, someone was looking back at her.
And
And
we
it's
are
true.
sacred mirrors. We're sacred mirrors for each other.
No.
Somebody loves my work, and I think I haven't done anything, and you tell me I'm a well-rounded creative blah. Somebody else has never heard of me, and I think I'm it's like, who do you find to reflect what you're looking to heal? Or
Well, it's interesting that you say this. I lead a book group on Mondays. And the book that we're reading right now is The Four Agreements. Have you ever read The Four Agreements?
I haven't, but I'm really getting into Ram Dass now.
Well, The Four Agreements, and one of the four agreements is that it's never about you.
Right.
And one of the people in the group mentioned that in a group that she's in, they were talking about another artist recently, and she just recently got a rave review. And who leads the group had her read the review in front of the class. And I said, would she have read the review if it was a negative review? Because and it's interesting, because are we believing that person because they raved about us?
Right.
Would we have put the same faith in that person if they had given us a negative review? And it's the same thing when someone gives us a negative review, we will obsess over that. Why did they say this? Why did they say this? Why did they say this? And we never, and this to be true, we never put the same energy into the same rave review that we get.
Not only that, but if you actually look in the field of psychology, because this is a whole other thing that I'm into now, which is mind-body healing stuff, because I had a lot of pain issues, and I did not want to go down the path my mother went down, which was she replaced 2 hips, 2 knees, and a shoulder. And I replaced 1 hip and did not have the result I was hoping for, and I was like, I'm done. So, and there's a whole new thing, not new, but a whole area of mind-body medicine that, in any event, without taking this off of show business, I just want to say that in the psychology world and the sort of research science, brain science world, they call that negative bias. That's human. We're wired for negative bias. It's actually, we're wired for it. We can't help it. It's what has allowed us to be a species that has survived the world that we've created for all these years. And so, yeah. And once you know that, there's so much freedom in going, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have that reaction. I'm going to go, why did they say that? Why did they say that? But then I can step back and remember, it's just a voice in my head that's going to find the negative bias. I'm always going to not hear the positive, and it's not, none of it is the truth. Let go, let go, let go.
Let go, let it go.
Let go, let God.
My dear friend Kassira McKee, she has a book called Let That Go.
Yeah.
Get the book. It's a great book. This hour has flown. The hour's gone. You are welcome here at any time.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm going to end where we started. And who or what are you celebrating today? I want to celebrate Ralph Lampkin Jr. because he was the one who facilitated this today.
Absolutely.
So Ralph, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ralph,
celebrate.
Let's just say, for those, because maybe there are people who don't know, is a publicist in this business, and he has been a dear, wonderful friend, done an incredible job for me and all the people he's worked with me and not with me. And so
He walks the walk and he talks the talk, and he's one of the best in the business. So, Ralph, I celebrate you today and I thank you. Don't go anywhere for a moment, Hillary, because I'm going to
Okay.
give you the final word today. It could be about anything that we spoke about today that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any final message that you want to leave everyone with today. You've got the final word in a moment. I want to thank everybody for being here today. You could have been anywhere. Um, I don't want to go down a negative note, but I do want to acknowledge four things that have happened in the news lately. There was yet another senseless shooting today in Charlotte, North Carolina. This time, a little girl was playing basketball. I don't know if you've heard this yet.
No.
And the basketball landed in the neighbor's yard, and the man shot her father. And and I am thinking about the fact that we have lost a sense of empathy with each other when people are using guns as a point of resolution instead of getting to talk to each other and getting to know our neighbors. Just this week, a young boy ringing the wrong doorbell. There was an incident, I talked about this a couple of days ago, years ago, where I accidentally got in the back seat of someone's car thinking that I was in my own car. Just think if the circumstances had been, what happened in Texas, a young girl who lost her life pulling into the wrong driveway. We've got to stop. We've got to start showing love for each other.
Make me cry here. Yeah.
Yeah, we just got to get back to this, and don't think of these as just mindless news items. People hear it on the news, and then they go to the refrigerator and make themselves a ham sandwich. You've got to pay attention to what's going on, and because this affects each and every one of us. I end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Please, please, please pick up the phone today. Hillary, I want you to do the same thing. Pick up the phone and call someone that you haven't spoken to in a long time and let that person know that they matter in your life. It's important that we all do this. Not an email, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call, and let that person know. Better yet, make a plan to go out to dinner with that person if you can do so. I have a dear friend, he says, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that note, Hillary, I'm going to leave the screen and I'm going to turn it over to you. I want you back anytime. And let's do dinner sometime. I think we'd have a great
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have song will travel.
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you so much. And Ralph, thank you. Hillary, it's all yours. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Wow, that's a big, heavy responsibility. I have not a lot more to say except that this has been an incredible treat. And what a journey this has been, being part of all of this. And I did not know about that last shooting because, I literally got up, had coffee, and got on this call. And I'm sort of beyond words right now. But I did write a song with Michele Brourman called While There Is Still Time. And it was written at the beginning of the pandemic. And it basically just is a reminder that we need to be kind to each other while there's still time. So I encourage you to find the song. Not for me, but from my heart. Thank you.